My brokerage account is worth about $500,000 today, and the first time I put money into the market, I had less than $1,000 to my name. Actually started my first account with around $100 and eventually sold everything in that account in 2008 when the financial crisis happened. And of course, we seen a complete recovery, but I was not part of that because I had sold my entire position. Now in today's video, I want to tell you the full story of my investing journey, where I started, the specific decisions that built the portfolio that we see today, and really the mistakes that cost me years, if not literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in my portfolio, and of course covering every ETF that I own now and why exactly I do this, because no one on this channel has seen everything in all one place and knowing exactly the investing journey that I really went through. So let's go ahead and get into this. Now, if you're like me, I grew up in a household where money was stress, wasn't a topic for conversation. We didn't talk about investing. We didn't talk about net worth. We discussed bills. What bills were going to be paid, what bills were going to be paid, and what bills and what would happen if we did not pay those bills in the entirety. The lesson that I really absorbed from this as a kid is simple and very unspoken. Money is something that you worry about, and my mom, being a single mom, worried about it all of the time. It was not something that you build with. It was a framework that I carried into my adult life, and honestly, probably subconsciously, not even knowing that it was there. Now, nobody around me invested. When we started talking about investing, the word portfolio was never part of the conversation that I can remember at all. When I knew about the stock market, or what I heard from adults, was that it was bad, meaning the stock market was going to be something that hurt people, or a lot of people lost money at that time. Not something that you build with. It was not a starting point, not a very dramatic story or a real big disaster, just the complete absence of a financial framework that was pointed towards wealth building. It was a blank page, and there was no investing education where it was supposed to be. And even today, when we start looking at our schools, when we start looking at individuals that are in high school, almost no place offers kind of a formal education or more of a concrete example of what the financial literacy and education would look like. Now, when I started investing, I had a very small amount of money to work with, under $1,000. Like I said, it was about 100. Investing, it felt like it was really urgent, but it felt like it was entirely foreign to me. And it wasn't something like I had been handed a tool without any instructions of how to do this. So I did what most people do in this situation. I asked around, I heard something that sounded reasonable. And honestly, when I bought the first thing that someone pointed me to, which was the Invesco S&P 500 mutual fund. And even back then, when it came to investing, that was my first investment. And you had to do it by check. If you remember, from a bank account, you write checks. It was actually by mail through Invesco when I was in the service. It was not an ETF, it was a mutual fund. And that, of course, at the time was a standard investment vehicle for retail investors that wanted that broad market exposure that we see today in ETFs. Now, when I put in $100 in there, and really it worked for a while, the market was doing exactly what the market was doing. It had good years, it was going up, and this was just after that dot-com boom. Checked it periodically, seen the number was a little bit higher. And of course, I didn't have a smartphone. I didn't have the internet at that time to go ahead and update it and check and see what everything happened with this portfolio. Then 2007 happened, then 2008, the S&P 500 fell around 57% from that October 2007 peak all the way down to the March 2009 low. Every single week, my account balance was much lower than the previous week. Every headline was worse than the last. Banks were failing, the word recession and of course depression were the conversation going hand in hand, thinking there was going to be a global economic collapse. And of course, the lessons that I draw back as a kid, money is something you worry about. It is not something that you build with. Came back and it came very loud. So I sold out my entire portfolio, locking in those losses. And at that, locking in the losses, I sat on the sidelines for probably about the next 7 years. The S&P bottomed out March of 2009. Then it recovered. Then it went to new all-time highs. Over the next decade, it tripled in the value. And I watched all of that from the sidelines. I wasn't invested at all at that time. Every year the market went up, I thought about my decision when I sold at the absolute bottom. Now that experience, not a bad investment, not a bad fund. It was completely correct investment, but I held it in an absolute wrong way. This is the most expensive financial lesson that I have ever learned and that I have paid for, not in the dollars that I lost, but it is in the multitude of years of compounding that I would have had if I would have stayed invested in the entirety. Now, years after the crash, I started really focusing on finance, and I got into a book called The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley and Wilco Danko, published in 1996. And if you've ever read this, it is based on decades of research on how millionaires in America actually accumulated their wealth, and the findings destroyed almost every single assumption that I have ever had about wealth, what it looked like, and exactly how it was built. The millionaires in this research didn't live in the houses you expected or the ones that I seen in my neighborhood. They drove the vehicles you wouldn't expected. They didn't show and really display any signs of that really high wealth that we see now on TV and social media. They accumulated it very quietly, very consistently over decades by spending less than they earned, investing the difference, and never confusing with looking wealthy to actually being wealthy. The book put language on something I really never had a framework for, that most people that are performing wealthy and are wealthy and look wealthy might not be wealthy at all. And those people that are building real wealth were largely invisible, including almost invisible to themselves at the very beginning. That book sent me back to the market, but this time it was entirely different. I was not looking for a hot fund. I wasn't looking for a tip from someone. I was looking for the most boring, most consistent, most automatic version of what the millionaires were doing. That, of course, was low cost, broad market, automatic contributions, never selling in my portfolio, which led me to the journey of the ETFs. Now, the first one that I ever bought was the VOO. I put in exactly what I could. I set up automatic contributions, and I made one decision that I had never made the first time. I decided in advance, I am not going to sell my portfolio. I'm not going to sell my assets, even if there is a crash. Now, that decision made long before the crash ever arrived is the reason when 2022 happened and there was a massive pullback, it cost me nothing. I held, and actually through dollar cost averaging, I purchased a lot more. The recovery happened with me this time, and this time I was fully invested through all of it. Now, from that VOO foundation, the portfolio built slowly and then, of course, faster as we're seeing the compounding. Every position I hold today and the specific reason I hold it, starting with the VOO, that is the foundation. I've held this, and when I started my portfolio, I had one ETF, and it was the VOO for a multitude of years. This is the first ETF that I bought after reading The Millionaire Next Door. And really, it sent me back to the market. 20% of the portfolio right off the bat as we're sitting right now. It has a very low cost at that 0.03 per year, 15% annualized return over the last 10 years, $1 trillion in assets as of June 2026. It is the position that I know and everyone should own when everything else is built around it. And if you're new to investing, it is the one position that I would advise. Then, of course, we added in the QQQM. We really understood the AI thesis and what was coming down the pipeline. It is the same 100 companies as the QQQ, but of course, a little bit cheaper in the basis points because we are long-term holders. Added at 20% when $600 billion in hyperscale money was coming for AI infrastructure, and really looking 18% this year. It's kind of crazy how well it's performing. And this, of course, was my growth tilt. So when we look at the VOO, it is the basis. When you look at the QQQM and all the other ETFs, they are meant to outperform that VOO. Then we get into the SPMO. This is my largest position, 30% of the portfolio, and most people never talked about it when I actually bought into it. It owns the 100 highest momentum stocks within the S&P 500. It rebalances twice a year. 10-year annualized return over 20%, which is kind of crazy. $10,000 grew to $48,000 against the VOO's 35. So definitely seeing the gains in here. And I sized it at 30% because I knew I wanted to move the needle. Now, the rest of the portfolio, the SMH, the SOXQ, the SCHD, and the QTUM, of course, a lot of semiconductor exposure there. Even looking at the SMH, which is up 72%, doing incredibly well, and having the exposure and having roughly 20% of this exposure into those high tech. This, of course, is a very small position that I'm going to be holding for decades in this portfolio. Each position has earned its weight, or it got trimmed like the SCHD did when we bought in the SOXQ. There are three specific things that I understand now that I wish someone had told me so many years ago. The first one being the starting amount matters far less than the starting date. If you're under $1,000, it is a real starting point, even if it's $100, because the investor who builds wealth didn't start with more money than you did. They started earlier and they didn't stop and they didn't sell even when it felt irrational, even when it felt like the market was in a downturn. They continued buying. every month you wait costs more than you can actually ever imagine before you finally start. Second, the holding decision is worth a lot more than the buying decision. I have spent years focused on what to buy, and what I understand now is it's more important about what you do after you buy, which brings you that actual return. The 2008 crash did not destroy wealth for any investors who held the entire time. It transferred wealth from those investors who sold out during that time into investors that actually did not sell. If you're on the wrong side of that transfer, I made sure I was on the right side in 2020 and again in 2022. And the difference in the outcome was not just the numbers in the investment. It was a decision made long in advance. When the numbers went down, I would continue buying in the entirety. Third, the financial framework that you grew up with is not neutral. It will either help you or it will cost you. I grew up knowing that money was a big stressor in the household. That framework made me sell in 2008, and it seemed like a responsible decision at the time. It was not at all. Now, rewriting that framework from money is something you worry about to money is something you can actually build with, is the actual work. The ETFs are just the vehicle. The mindset is the engine that is going to create wealth. The Millionaire Next Door gave me a new framework, and ever since then, I've been executing week after week and year after year. Now, $500,000, that number exists because of a sequence of decisions, some of them very smart, some of them costly, and of course, one in particular costed me years and years of compounding because I let fear make the call when it came to investing instead of sticking to the new framework. That Invesco mutual fund was not a mistake. Selling it during the crash and sitting on the sidelines for a multitude of years while the recovery happened was the biggest mistake I've made. And honestly, one reason I did not make that same mistake in 2020 and again in 2022 was I had that framework before the crash had ever arrived, not because I was smarter, but because I was much braver when it came to investing, because I have a system that I've trusted, and it is a system that I trusted through all the social media influence, through all the headlines, through everything else that they said. It is a system that I did yesterday with 12 habits. This portfolio is what it looks like when you apply it consistently over an extended amount of time. Now, of course, guys, drop a comment down below. Let me know where you're at in the journey. Are you just starting? Are you a few years in the investing journey? Are you a lot further along than you expected? That is a great way to be. And if you've ever sold during the crash and watched it recover without you, you have to let me know in the comments, and I have to know that I am not the only one that did it. I read every single comment and I will reply to all of them. Subscribe if this is the kind of real money, real story content that you want to see. And of course, I'll see you tomorrow.